Hello and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast, A Rich Comic Life. My name is Richard Gill and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 1,000 comedians over the past 47 years. My guest today is the brilliant comedian, it's Bella Hull. Yay!
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Lovely to see you, and thank you so much for doing this.
It's a total pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, the interview's going to last about 45 minutes to an hour, and we're going to kick off by asking, how did you become a comedian in the first place, please?
How did I become a comedian in the first place? I think I always was fascinated by comedy. And I was, it's a hard question to answer because it's so kind of broad, isn't it? I bet people have such different answers for this. I guess I kind of always was fascinated in how to make people laugh, and it was something that I was quite good at school. I was kind of like a class clown, I guess. And then I kind of got more interested in stand-up. I was listening to lots of like podcasts and comedians' podcasts when I was about 14, 15. And then by the time I was 17, I couldn't not do it anymore. I had to start doing stand-up. So that's when I started doing open mics. And I sort of just never stopped. And that's the story.
Wow. So, so you obviously had the bug for it, and
Totally.
did you start with just working in doing like 5 minute routines in pubs with inviting friends along?
Yeah, well, no, definitely not inviting friends. Which is quite difficult because a lot of the open mic gigs when you're very new, you have to bring someone, and they're bringer gigs.
Right.
So in order to perform, you have to have a +1, otherwise there'll be no one at the gig.
Right.
And I would, because I was so secretive about it, I didn't want anyone to know that I was doing comedy.
Oh.
I would always just say that I had someone bringing along, and then I would just lie and say that they were really ill or they couldn't come at the last minute or whatever. And I kind of got away with not bringing anyone for about 6 months.
Wow.
Because it was just such a like... I was at school, I was in sixth form, so I didn't want people to like think that I was full of myself.
Sure.
Or I thought I was really funny or whatever. So yeah, I was working from 5 minutes, which when you first start is a very long time to fill. I actually sometimes think shorter sets the hardest ones to do, because you don't have any time to like warm into who you are on stage. Yeah, my first gig was at I think it's still going, it's at the Rising Star Comedy Club.
Know it well.
King and Queen pub in Great Portland Street.
Yeah. Wow. What sort of year was this?
Sorry?
What sort of year was this that you did your first gig?
I guess this would have been nearly 6 years ago. So when was that? 2016?
Yeah, 2016. Wow.
About
wow,
2016.
Wow.
And Pete Nash was still... Is his name Pete Nash? Paul Nash was hosting it.
Yeah.
And I would go on with it absolutely like shaking like a leaf, piece of paper. Because I couldn't remember anything because I get so nervous, and I just sort of recite my jokes and then run away and run home.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that was me for the first 6 months.
Was it a full house the first night?
I remember thinking there were too many people there. I think it was probably that meant that there were about 12 people there. But to me that was a lot. And I just remember everyone coming off stage and everyone being like, well done, but also thinking she's a child, like what's she doing here on her own, kind of thing.
I had a go at stand-up comedy once. I've watched you all for over 40 years, but I thought I've got to get this out of my system.
Yeah, of course.
And I know I knew the promoter for the Free Fringe, and he said to me. I said to him, I want to have a go at stand-up, and he said, well, I've got a gong show for you on a Monday afternoon, and it's full of old people, and it couldn't be better. So I did a script, and he liked it, and I walked out, and he said, go on. So I walked out, and I was terrified as well, and And the first thing I said to them was, there was 3 people in, and I said to them, ladies and gentlemen, people think I look like Eddie the Eagle Edwards, the ski jumper, but I can't see the resemblance myself. And one old bloke at the back just went, fuck off, and got me
no.
off.
Oh, it's
And
so
it
terrible.
was like...
Because also, I think before you do stand up, you have this vision of yourself absolutely storming it and blowing the roof off.
Yeah.
And then it's just this like crushing blow when you actually do it, because you realise that it was a total fantasy.
I think though, and I think this runs through a lot of the interviews with the comedians. It seems that obviously the more you do, the more experience you get. And you become a better comedian, good or bad gigs. You know, I think you have to face the bad gigs to become a better comedian. You agree with that?
Yeah. And you also have to do a lot of shit gigs to then really appreciate the lovely gigs that I get to do now. You know, I don't think I've broken. I mean, I'm kind of a professional comedian now, but I still don't think I've broken even on all of the like money I spent going to gigs for free kind of thing. And you know, sometimes you had to pay to go on stage. There were some gigs where you had to pay a tenner. To go on. I remember one of my most like humbling moments was when I thought I'd maybe done 10 gigs. I was getting quite cocky, and I wanted to enter So You Think You're Funny.
Yes.
But you couldn't enter it if you were under 18.
Right.
But the woman who was running it said to me, if you can get like a reference from someone that's seen you perform, then you can enter. I'll let you enter at 17. And so I got this guy to give me a reference, and the reference said, Bella did my gig on the 2nd of May or whatever. She was the second best comedian on the night, and there were 3 comedians.
Well, at least he's being positive.
Yeah. That was me like, okay. It was so brutal.
Oh, dear me. Did you ever find it difficult at all to break through into comedy? And what I mean by that was, did you ever have any difficult experiences at the start performing? Was it difficult to find venues for to book the gigs, things like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was quite lucky in that I went to a university where there was a lot of comedy going on,
right?
And so I could sort of get involved with that. But that was really hard to get into because the main hurdle I had was just performance anxiety, because I really wanted to do it, but I just couldn't. Like I would just, I'd have these visions of myself doing really well, and then it would come showtime and I would just crumble.
Wow.
And I'd be feeling sick and I'd be shaking and sweating, and it was so like, why am I doing this to myself?
Wow.
And that was kind of one of those things where I just had to do it scared for a few months. And then I kind of just got over it, and I read a lot of books about performance anxiety and stuff like that, and it sort of just, I snapped out of it somehow.
Well
I do
done.
still get nervous now if I haven't gigged for a few days or whatever.
Wow.
I will still get a bit, heartbeaty.
Wow. Are you okay with this? Is this environment okay for you?
Yeah, no, this is completely fine. Yeah. I mean, I'm actually remarkably relaxed now. I think if anything, I should be a bit more anxious.
It's fine. Don't worry about it.
But no, I used to be so anxious to go on stage. And that for me was definitely the biggest hurdle. And you don't really hear people talking about performance anxiety in the kind of podcasting world or anything, because I gig with so many comedians that just, it's nothing going on stage and they don't really care. And I'm a bit like that now as well, but especially like if you are doing 5 or 6 gigs a week, you don't really have time to care. You just sort of have to go on and do your bits.
Yeah,
and if you don't like you, then you just have to go over it. But definitely that was the main hurdle for me.
It's interesting because I once had to. We were told at college, this is years ago, that we were going to teach somebody something that we knew, and we had to stand up and show them how to do it, and there was questions and everything. And I taught the person how to do the only card trick I ever knew. And because I hadn't done it for about 5 years, when I stood up, I forgot it. So
Yeah.
it turned into a comedy show.
Yeah. Been there.
But
Totally
yeah, it's
been
just what's the
there. I
old
mean, I
adage?
was in. I hadn't. I've been away in the Lake District over Easter, and so I hadn't done a gig in maybe 10 days. And yesterday I was in Southampton for a gig, and I had to do 20 minutes, which is a weird amount of time because at the moment I'm doing a lot of previews, which is like an hour, or I do 10, 15 minutes at Top Secret. So
Yeah.
it sort of was a weird, and I'd done like 11 minutes, and I was looking at my watch thinking, I feel like I've done everything that I planned to do, and then I kind of had to go through, and I remembered a few jokes I hadn't told. I had to ask the audience whether or not I'd told them yet. It was just like such a mangled set in the end. But I so get what you mean about the kind of, I
It's
get so forgetful.
terrifying. I had other than the blog, the most creative thing I ever did was write a play, and
Oh, wow.
we put it on for Comic Relief. It was for the Edinburgh Fringe. It's called The Applicant, and it's basically about me who comes down to London, has never been interviewed for a job, and I've got a successful girlfriend who's got a successful job. And each scene is me being interviewed by a character before I'm sitting in the waiting room, nervy, looking around at the crowd. So I write this monologue to get the story going. And I ran out the first night we did it, and I forgot that as well. I was like a rabbit in headlights. I was thinking, I've
It is
written,
kind
I've
of the
written
worst
this. This is
combination,
all.
I think. If
Yeah.
you are a bit nervous because it just make you, your mind just goes blank.
Yeah.
And when you're nervous, that's the time when you need to remember things the
Yeah.
most.
Yeah. It is. It is fascinating. What do you like to talk about on stage?
Well, I talk about all sorts of things. I'm trying to kind of, I guess when I started, it was sort of, you take the advice that you're given from other comedians that you have to talk about yourself, you talk about things that make you unique and interesting, and I definitely kind of played a lot with that for a while. I'm trying to branch out more into kind of more, I guess, observational stuff. When I was at university, like there was such people were so judgy about people that did observational comedy, and it was really looked down upon if you did observational comedy.
Wow.
Which I now think is so stupid because I think observational comedy is so brilliant, and
Yeah.
there's something very connective about it. So I'm trying to kind of branch out into that more. But I mean, my comedy is very just personal, so
Yeah.
it's mainly just about the events that have happened in my life. My kind of show that I'm taking to Fringe is about, it's about a breakup, and it's about my family, and I mean, you've seen the preview, so it's kind of it's all quite personal stuff that I'm mining through, like little stories and anecdotes, and then building bits out of that. So yeah, I guess my style is quite self-indulgent, really. I'm not like, I don't know, I really admire people that are able to do kind of political stuff, but it's just never been something that I've been very good at.
I think you've hit the nail on the head though. The wonderful thing about your act, when I saw it at I'd Always Be Comedy, I saw a preview of it. You're very unique and you're very warm with the audience, and they very easily engaged with you, which you could therefore say whatever you liked, really, because you were there to get your points across, but you made them so funny with the way that you wrote them. It was wonderful, and I was very impressed. And
Thank you.
yeah, we've never met, but I'm determined to come and see you very soon, live on stage. How do you remember all your routines? Do you have like a notebook, or do you write it all on your hand, or?
Yeah, I definitely have a notebook. Where's my notebook? This is the Notebook of Doom.
Right.
I have at the moment.
What a name.
And I just have like all of my stuff written in.
Yeah.
And sometimes I sort of like colour code it.
Right.
So I'll like highlight the stuff that's extra new in pink. But this is kind of if I'm
That's
doing a work in
interesting.
progress.
Yeah.
I feel like work in progress is you're allowed to sort of lay it out on a stool and it's kind of socially acceptable.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, I think memory, you know a lot more than you think you do. And all it takes for me to remember like the more you do something as well, the easier it becomes to remember. And if I think, especially if you've written the bit, you sort of are excited about telling people about the bit, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's kind of more just. Sometimes I just forget a little detail or a topper or whatever. So yeah, I think most of the time you just enter into the rhythm of it, and then it kind of becomes autopilot.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
sort of just flows along. The thing I find hardest is like segues, or if I'm restructuring a big bit, I often get to the end of it and I kind of think, what do I do now? And that's sort of not ideal, and that's when I need my notebook or like my hand.
Yeah. Fascinating. You won the Yellow Comedy Young Comedian of the Year in 2019, and
Yeah.
were placed in and were placed in the 2 North Down New Act competition in 2020. Congratulations! That's
Thank you very
really
much.
well done. Please, can you describe the experiences and also what your view is of comedy competitions? Do you think they're a good thing?
Well, I think so. When I won the Yellow Comedy Award, I had been doing stand up in. I just moved to London and I'd been doing a few months of like open mics, and I was very determined at that point. I was doing like 3 or 4 open mics a week, and that was really good because I think because I was an open mic comedian, having a little accolade like that helped me to get up the kind of hierarchy. And I think when you're an open mic comedian, there's such a big hierarchy of gigs. There's like the kind of the bringer gigs, which is the bulk of what you do, and then you might start getting invited to non-bringer gigs, or even gigs where you get paid a fiver, or stuff like that. And it's quite a slow slog, but like an accolade like that really helped me to kind of leapfrog a few of those kind of stages.
Sure.
So that was a really nice one. And then a year later, I did the 2 North Down competition, and that was a total game changer for me because that was what led me to get signed by an agent.
Wow.
So then from that, I was able to basically, I mean, then we had lockdown. So I think I placed that in maybe March 2020, and then I signed with an agent, and then I didn't hear from them for 6 months.
Yeah.
But it was like definitely a game changer for me. And I think comedy competitions are a load of bollocks most of the time, and weird people win. And I think often like judges in comedy competitions, especially people that judge a lot of comedy competitions and they're not agents, they're not necessarily looking for someone with a lot of mainstream potential as much as they're looking for like the weird person in a weird costume that they've not seen and that is completely unique. So I think in a lot of ways, comedy competitions are often quite odd environments for comedy. And often people that are quite comedians, if that makes sense, like end up doing really well. I've talked loads about comedy competitions with like agents and stuff like that in the past, and I think that they are, in a way, comedy is a meritocracy, because if you are very good, you will ultimately get noticed. But at the same time, competitions you have to take with a pinch of salt because it's so subjective. And there are some comedians that are incredibly successful, but if they were to do a comedy competition now, no one knew who they were. Because they're so niche, they would have failed, kind of thing.
You've answered a spin-off question actually, because I was going to say, do you think they do get you noticed if you win comedy competitions? Do you get more gigs as a result of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think agents are agents and stuff is the main person people that you want to get noticed by when you're doing competitions. If you're not signed, or like sometimes there are like industry people that work for TV and stuff that will beat at them. But like you can never really know who's going to be at them, and so I think it's one of those things where it's kind of luck of the draw. I was very lucky in that there were a lot of agents at that particular evening that I did, where I came third or whatever, and that was enough to kind of get the ball rolling. But yeah, I think I know that there have been a lot of competitions where big competitions in the final where no agency have been there, and so it's kind of with agents and stuff, I feel like sometimes the agent's got to feel like they discovered you rather
yeah.
than the other way around.
It's interesting because there are a number of, I think, different methods that scale comedy. I think another one's a geographical thing. My home city, it was interesting you said the Lake District before. My home city's Carlisle.
Oh, really?
And I go back a lot. I absolutely love it. But the comedy scene there for years was dormant. There was hardly anybody there, and now they've got two. They've got a big theatre and a smaller comedy music club, and they get all the acts in, and it's suddenly taken off. Whereas when I came down to London, you could go every night. Yeah, I know it. I know it's the capital city and everything, but it was determined as to where it all was, and I think now it's taken off to such an extent, comedy, that if you can get noticed, obviously it's a good thing.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I'm quite like, I've read a lot of books about comedy in the 80s and stuff, and in the 90s, and especially comedy in the UK was much, much smaller, I think, before the kind of indie comedy boom in the, I don't know when it was, the noughties or a bit later on. And I think now, I mean, it was amazing when I was an open micer, because I literally, if I wanted to, could do 7 gigs a week. And if you're really determined, I mean, it's a lot of travelling and stuff, and you often have to travel an hour and a half just to be able to do 5 minutes, and then you have to stay there for 4 hours and watch everyone else. But if you are really determined to get very good, it's an amazing place to do stand-up. There are so many places available. And I think also because of that, there are so many people giving comedy a go, which is great, but it means that it's very overwhelming, because I used to do kind of a lot of open mics where there would be maybe 25 acts, each doing 5 minutes, and which, by the way, is hell on earth. There are about 7 different intervals.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, and like some of the acts are brilliant, but then some of the acts you just think, oh my god.
I've been there as well.
But I think there are so many more comedians now around, and there are so many people making a living from comedy in all sorts of ways, and it's a really exciting time to do comedy, because so many people are interested in it and so many people go to see it. But there's a kind of flip side to that, where I think you can quite easily feel dwarfed by the scene, and it can be, quite really hard to, I think, feel unique as a voice, or feel like you have anything to contribute to comedy, because a lot of people are quite good at writing jokes, and so it's quite hard, I think, sometimes to feel like you've got a USP. Like in Edinburgh this year, I'm debuting, and there are like, I don't know, 80 other debutantes or something. Like, it's ridiculous.
Wow.
And it's really easy to compare yourself to other people and just be like, oh god, well I don't have a bit about saucepans, so I'm shit, kind of thing. It's sort of, which is so stupid, but it kind of, it does get to you sometimes.
It is an extraordinary art form, because exactly like you say, you can get overwhelmed by all the other comedians, but when it goes well and there's something unique that you've got to say, it must be the most incredible feeling in the world to get a laugh back from an audience.
Definitely. I think that's kind of the thing that I find most exciting about comedy, is when you do a bit of new material and it really, for whatever reason, it really sings and it really kind of works. I love that feeling of just coming up with something and it hitting a chord with people, and not knowing that was something that you could connect with strangers about, kind of. That's what I really, really enjoy about comedy.
That's brilliant. I've regularly been the 5-minute friend in a new comedy night, sitting there laughing at all the correct times with the jokes and everything. But I absolutely love those free comedy nights, and long may they continue. Okay, we've touched on this, but I'd like to delve a bit more. Do you suffer from any nerves before you go on stage? And if so, how do you cope?
At the moment, I'm quite good. At the moment, I'm quite kind of chilled out. I think it so depends on whether or not it's a new environment and the size of the stage. So if it's a really little stage, I'm often completely fine. or if it's a club, like I do Top Secret comedy quite a lot,
Yeah.
and I never get nervous there because it's just like home turf to me. And even though the people are different, I know the layout of the room, I know the acoustics, I know the staff. Like it's kind of that. The familiarity of that, I think, prevents me from feeling nervous.
That's brilliant.
But yeah, if it's a really big stage, or if it's often like I'll go on and not be nervous, and then I won't do very well, and then the nerves will start to. Then I'll start to panic and sort of not really know how to salvage the situation. But it's such a kind of paradoxical thing, because I think the less nervous you are, often the better it will go, because when an audience can sense that you're nervous, they stop laughing, and it's not because they don't like you, it's just because they feel nervous for you and they want it to go well for you. But I think for a gig to go well, the audience have to be really relaxed and eating out of the palm of your hand. And to do that, you have to at least act as if you are completely in control. But that's quite a difficult thing to master, I think, and it's definitely taken me a good few years to get there.
Is it fair to say that if you do get nervous, once you start talking into the microphone, the nerves go?
Yeah, definitely. If I'm doing like a 20-minute set, often the first minute, I'll be very aware that I'm swallowing weirdly, or I'm saying things too quickly or too slowly. But then once you've kind of developed, because also I think in my brain there are loads of different categories of how a gig can go. And once I've realised, okay, this is a gig with slightly older people, or this is a gig where they'll laugh at stuff about romance but not stuff about family, or vice versa, or whatever. Then I can kind of relax into it, and I think a big kind of leap that I made was just being able to trust myself enough to go off script.
Right.
Because I used to have just an absolutely military precision set, and it was exactly 5 minutes, no matter where I was performing it. And it was just joke. There was no interaction with the audience. There was no kind of, if someone would drop a glass, I would completely ignore it.
Wow.
If someone would come in or leave the room, completely ignore it. I would just, and I think that kind of, now I look back and I think it is just the mark of someone who has less experience, because now if I'm doing a set, I trust myself enough if something happens to kind of stop, address it, have a chat, have a laugh over it, and then kind of resume.
Go back. It's good. It's good. That's a very good way to look at it, because you're getting everybody involved, and they're letting you in as well, so everybody's having a good time. And
I think what's so like special about comedy, especially like work in progress gigs and new material gigs, is that they are such unique events that will never happen again. And if you're chatting to the audience, there might be a person that works at Deloitte, and a person that is working for charity, and a person that and if you chat to them and then they're all together, and you can have these inside jokes with them that are never going to occur ever again in the history of the universe. And I think that it's leaning into the fact that every gig is very special and unique, and things are going to happen in that gig that aren't going to happen ever again. That is something that you shouldn't be afraid of, but we should really kind of encourage. And I think it took me a good few years to kind of realise that it was okay to go off script, and I could be funny off script if I just trusted myself, kind of thing.
That's wonderful. That's a great answer. Let's move on to Edinburgh itself. I am very fortunate to have my holidays at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. I go every year. My first one was 2005. And I've only missed the last two, obviously, because of the pandemic. What was your first Edinburgh Fringe like? Have you been?
I've been. So I went for the whole run. I went in 2018 with a university sketch comedy show.
Right.
We were in assembly rooms. I think we were in.
Yeah, know it well.
4 or 5. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was very intense. I got quite skinny because I was walking around for the first time in my life. And that was quite great. But it was just one of those it was very emotionally intense, I think. But there's the great thing about it is there's no way that you can leave that festival and be a worse performer.
Exactly.
there's just no way. And I think also that was another thing that just was a death nail in my performance anxiety, because I was just performing every day, and it just becomes like a thing that you just are so relaxed about. And yeah, I definitely got a lot better. And I think you go through such an emotional roller coaster when you're performing every day for a month, the same thing, or more or less the same thing, because there are moments where you think, I am the best at this, I'm brilliant, I'm about to be discovered, and there are moments where you think, I am a complete disaster, I should leave, I should quit, like I'm an embarrassment, and those two emotions can happen in the span of 24 hours, and you're having such, I'm a very emotional person in general anyway, but it's such a roller coaster, and you're around so many similar personalities, and people that share your dream, and that can feel so amazing, but it can also feel absolutely terrible.
What's really interesting about the Fringe itself is it's 25 performances if you're doing a full run, and I've been first week, middle week, last week, the last week of it, and I think the middle week's the best time to go because everybody's just warmed up and they're flying. And the last week, I remember one year I went the last week and half the comedians had lost the voice because they were exhausted, and it was like, oh dear me.
Yeah, I think that's also such a big skill. I mean, I think a lot of like doing really well in comedy actually isn't about raw talent. It's about whether or not you can not binge drink.
Yeah, very much so. It is an extraordinary thing. I mean, as soon as I step off the train at Edinburgh Waverley, I've got all my friends are coming up in the week. I've done this extraordinary spreadsheet with all the shows and everything. I see about 50 shows, and I just love it. I cannot get enough of it, and the wonderful thing. And I go to other fringes as well, so Brighton, Hastings, Leicester. It's all year round now, which is good as well. So it's brilliant. As I said before, I was very impressed when I saw you at Always Be Comedy online very recently, about March time. Please, can you describe your writing process and where you get your ideas from? Because this was for a preview for your new Edinburgh show, wasn't it? Yeah.
My writing process is mainly just me forcing myself to do it in like I have to go to a cafe and sit down, buy myself a coffee and just do it. I journal quite a lot, and often that, like, if I have a big coffee and journal loads, often then I'll get an idea for something, and then that will kind of blend into, and then once I've got like a top line for a bit and I'm excited about it, often then the riffing can kind of start with myself, and then maybe I'll go to a gig and do the first line of it, see if it kind of gels, and then I'll kind of talk to the audience about it, build a bit more, and then for me the key is just being excited about it. If I'm kind of trying to write a bit that I'm not excited about, I find it so hard to write. So yeah, if I'm excited about the bit, that's where it all comes. But for me, journaling is like absolutely essential to my writing process.
That's fascinating.
Or just kind of having a top line and then just forcing myself to write 2 A4 pages about this particular thing and how I feel about it, and it will be 80% boring, and then 20% of it I'll think, oh, that could be a joke. But for me, it's just getting through loads of shit and and writing loads of shit down, and then thinking, oh, okay, there's that bit could be something.
So if you're writing
a lot of the quagmire kind of thing.
If you're writing a full Edinburgh show or a full tour show, is that specifically writing for the hour? Do you write an hour's worth of material, or is it 50 minutes, or how does that work?
So I think for it to be legally considered an hour show to qualify for all sorts of things, it has to be 55 minutes to 60 minutes.
Right.
And I'd like to calculate that in terms of like how many words. So that I think that's like about 7,000 words or something.
Right.
With the kind of pace that I say things. So
because that's a lot. That is a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I think it's, I mean, I've, especially given the fact that I spent the first 2 years of my career trying to perfect 5 minutes, doing an hour is a completely different beast. And
yeah.
also, I mean, I'm a real club comic. I do loads of clubs. That's kind of how I pay my rent. But doing a 20-minute set to a load of drunk people is just a different kettle of fish to writing an Edinburgh show.
Yeah.
And
Fascinating.
I think an Edinburgh audience expects a lot more from you and expects kind of more depth from you. And so I think that it's, for me, that's been a bit of a challenge because I have to prepare a show for a much more educated audience that kind of want cleverer stuff. And that's had to kind of get my motors spinning a bit. But I think, yeah, I mean, there are so many different stereotypes for an Edinburgh show, and I think that a lot of people you can easily go wrong trying too hard to kind of push the square peg into the round hole kind of thing and try to just mould your show into what you think the vague shape of an Edinburgh show is or should be. I think that that's definitely like something that I've, in my previews, found myself stumbling on.
I think as well, because this is your debut hour, isn't it? Your debut Fringe show. What's interesting is because you'll be doing it every night, it's as though you're doing it the first time. I'm often fascinated how comedians walk out and it's like, I've never done this before, but I'm going to make you laugh. It's extraordinary, and I can see that in you.
Difficult. And that's why I find new material so much more easy to do, because I'm sort of saying it for the first time, and I'm so excited to say it, and I think people can see the excitement in my eyes. But there's like a multitasking joke in my show that I've been doing since 2019, and I hate it. I hate that joke.
Here we go
it's
again.
Not funny
Tell it
to
again.
Me. I don't know why people laugh at it. I absolutely hate telling it, but I have to get it in. That's really hard to kind of say it in a way that is, because the light behind my eyes just dies when I start telling that joke. I've said it so many times.
That's brilliant. We would never notice. Where is the show on at Edinburgh this year?
It is in Pleasance. It's in Bunker 2.
I will be there. I'll make a point of coming to see you. If not before, definitely I'll be there. It's one of my favourite places, the Pleasance Courtyard.
Yeah, Pleasance Courtyard at 6:55 p.m, which I think is quite a good little time.
Yeah,
sort of
perfect.
Evening, middle of the evening. People won't be too drunk, but I'm hoping that they might have had a few pints.
It'll be great, and you're doing the full 25 days.
Yes, full run.
Well, congratulations and all the very best with that, and I will be there. So we can meet at last. It's lovely.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's move on. You've written for the BBC Radio 4 series Newsjack. Well done. Is writing for radio different to writing a stand-up routine? Is the process different?
I find it very, very different. Because for stand-up, I think I sort of know what my voice is, and so whenever I'm writing it, I'm kind of writing it for me to say it, so I can choose how to deliver it. But I think when you're writing for radio, it has to be very formulaically funny, and often a lot of the kind of punchlines that I'm milking, I think, from my shows is just the way that I say something, or the kind of way that I shrug when I say something, or my face. And I think you can't really do that with radio. It has to actually be funny on the paper.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of quite difficult, and I've found that quite difficult in the past. And also, like, I'm not that clued up in the news. So kind of when I was writing for Newsjack, I was really having to like study stuff really hard. To be able to make jokes about something, you have to really understand it. So I find that quite difficult. But certainly it's a lot more formulaic and kind of scientific as a process. It's also quite tough. I mean, it's a bit of a competition writing for Newsjack, because you can give in 10 jokes and they might not like any of them, and that's a whole day's work wasted, kind of thing. So
how did you get the deal? Did you just write it? Did they ask for writers and you wrote in?
Yeah, so it was like one of those. This was actually when I was a teenager. It was like a kind of submission process.
Right.
So they just got the public to submit loads of jokes, and I think they pay you a tiny bit of money if you get like a one-liner on or whatever. And I only got a couple of one-liners on, but it was a big proud moment for me that I was like, wow, I'm good at writing jokes, kind of thing. that was a kind of big confidence boost at me back in the day, because I kind of hadn't really started doing proper stand up at that point. It's very different though, and I think I much prefer just writing jokes for me to say, kind of thing.
I go to a lot of radio recordings and TV recordings as well as comedy nights, and one that particularly comes to mind, I once went to the Now Show, a recording of the Now Show, and the guest was John Culshaw. And at the end, at the start of the Now Show, they give you a little piece of paper with a question on, and you to give them a daft answer. And mine was, what's the most stupid thing that happened to you at school? And I said, I once fell asleep in the sixth form and somebody Tipp-Ex'd my glasses. And when I woke up, I thought I'd died. And John Culshaw read this out in the form of Alan Bennett. It's actually got on the radio.
That's so good.
I thought, I've written something for radio. This is great. But
that's so good.
But thank you very much. But it's wonderful that you're submitting to Newsjack, because it is a defining comedy show, a Radio 4 flagship show, isn't it? So
yeah, definitely.
Well,
and I think it's a real achievement for a young kind of comic that's just starting. It definitely is quite validating, I think, to get onto a show like that.
Yeah. Well done, you. Do you have any other ambitions as a comedian? So would you like a quiz show? Would you like to play the O2? Something like that? These are obviously yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes is the answer, is the short answer.
It's not a very good
For
question.
me, I'm just kind of, my main goals are just, I want to do Edinburgh, I want to do it this year, I want to do it next year, and I want to be mentally in a place where I can enjoy it and get out of it in one piece, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I really like going around the UK, so I think at some point I'd love to kind of, if my show does well,
tour.
Take it on a mini little tour to tiny venues around the UK. That would be really fun.
Take it to Carlisle, I'd love you.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, but I think it's just to kind of keep going and see where it goes, and get more experience and write more. And I think, it's so exciting when you kind of have a whole hour to fill, because you don't know what it's going to be by the end.
Yeah. That's great. Who are your favourite comedians, past and present?
In the past, my favourite comedians have been Paul Foot.
Brilliant. Great answer.
Paul Foot.
Yeah.
He was my favourite when I was like 16, 17.
Wow.
I'm a long-term fan of Maria Bamford.
Yeah.
Long-term fan of Mike Birbiglia.
Yeah.
John Mulaney. I love Ali Wong. I don't know if you know Taylor Tomlinson.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Who else do I love? I love also like Kat Cohen, Kate Ballant, Jacqueline Novak, that whole kind of group of people.
Sure, yes, yeah.
Yeah, kind of that kind of American like alternative scene. I think
Yeah.
Exciting. And then kind of, I don't know. The great thing about being a comedian is that you often like become friends with people that you've really admired for a really long time. So I'm quite good friends now with Paul Chowdhury, who I was a very long-term fan of, and now we get McDonald's together, so it's so brilliant. The kind of if the 18-year-old me could know that,
that's fantastic.
Amazing. But yeah, I kind of am a fan of everyone, to be honest. I think there are very few people that I think have absolutely no value as performers. I think it's just so great, the industry that I'm in and how varied it is.
Brilliant. And following on from that, like me, do you go to a lot of comedy gigs as a member of the audience? Or have you before you were a comedian? You do, yeah?
I do. I actually probably go to more than most comedians do.
That's great.
I'm going to the Bill Murray tonight, actually, just to kind of watch.
Right.
I love, especially, I think, the main places that I go are like Soho Theatre, Leicester Square Theatre, big kind of places where someone's doing a big show.
Yeah.
Those are kind of my favourite ones to go to. I love kind of seeing someone. I saw Michael McIntyre the other week.
Amazing.
£5 at the Soho Theatre.
Yeah.
It's just moments like that I love to kind of watch uber successful, uber famous people like live. I think it's really fascinating to see them because often they're very different live, or they're the same live, or it's just fascinating either way. I think to watch someone in the flesh.
Very
working
much
up new
so, yeah.
material.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I once I first saw Peter Kay in a club in Manchester on a bill of 5 comedians,
Yeah.
and he was well before he was famous, and he was 4th on the bill, and I laughed so hard that I missed the 5th act. And the 5th act was Dave Gorman, who I actually admitted, and he went, "Oh, I wasn't very
really?
good that night."
Oh wow! Oh,
But-
that's so yeah, but it's so interesting, isn't it? And I think it's so
Yeah.
interesting seeing like really successful comedians doing bits that don't really work.
Yeah.
Or, you know, seeing how they kind of control their audience, which
Yeah.
I think is quite difficult when you get super successful to kind of actually know whether your new material is good or bad, because your audience will just laugh regardless.
Very much so. Yeah. What
So,
What is interesting about my blog is I love to see comedians develop. So I list every single show that I've seen, and I was talking to Harry Hill a month ago. He hasn't been on here yet. I'd love to interview him, but I know him when I see him at the comedy nights, and I was chatting to him, and I said, 30 years ago, I first saw you downstairs at the King's Head in Crouch End, and you brushed past me. You were late for the show. You climbed up onto the stage, and you said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really sorry I'm late for the show. I had to have a testicle brought down," and paused, and then everybody laughed, and he said, "From Derby." And I said to him, "To this day, that's my favourite opening line for 30 years ago." And he went, "Oh yeah, I still do it regularly." And it's fascinating that there's so much joy to get from a specific comedy gig. You know, you remember things. There's so many memories in it. It's wonderful. How have you found online gigs as opposed to live stand-up? And what do you think the future is for comedy? Have you done many online gigs?
I've done a handful. I've definitely done fewer than other people, but I did a few. I did maybe 5 or 6 during the various lockdowns that we've had. My experience of them is broadly very positive. I think that they're great, and I actually because a lot of the time I resent the travel. Being on it. I mean, there was a gig the other day that got cancelled, and I was so relieved, because it was like you had to get a 2-hour train and then a 1-hour bus.
Oh God!
Gig, and it's just, I would take a Zoom gig over that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Any day. And it's also actually a great place to kind of do a new thing, because you can have your document up and actually deliver it how you want to deliver it, instead of delivering it in this kind of botched, half-remembered way.
Yeah.
So I think that they're incredibly valuable. I've done some Zoom gigs that feel more just like you're monologuing at the audience, and then I've done Zoom gigs where there's proper rapport and people are actually laughing. And to be honest, I think obviously the latter is preferable, but either is great and quite useful. I think Zoom gigs were an amazing thing during the lockdown, and I was a big fan of Catherine Bohart and Helen Bowers one.
Yeah.
That was Gigless is just amazing.
Yeah. They're two very special comics. They're in their own right, but together it worked a dream. Yeah.
I just absolutely loved that, and I was a big fan of that, and it made me feel much less alone.
That's brilliant.
So in the kind of lockdown, that was great. I'm not sure what the future for online gigs is. I mean, I kind of hope they don't completely disappear, because, as I said, I did the online one for ABC a couple of weeks ago, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And I do think that they're a lovely little setup especially for people that can't get to gigs or live far away, or whatever, to have that kind of live experience bottled. I think is quite special.
I totally agree with you. When lockdown started, if I hadn't had the online comedy, I don't know what I'd have done. But when they first started it, there was no audio on them, so I would dial in. I would dial into it, and I would be sitting here laughing at 4 walls, and I thought I was going to get taken away. But then they opened up the audio, and you could see the comedians could get the beat of the jokes, and they could chat to the audience and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and when it's done well, I used to go to Alwaysby Comedy. I still do.
Mm,
Um, Jarlath Regan's one was very good. The Irishman Abroad one was good.
mm.
The Happy Mondays one was very good. When they were done well, they were really good.
Yeah,
But for
yeah,
me, you can't beat the live experience
yeah.
because
I agree.
you're in the moment, I think, and as you said before, you never know what's going to happen, and that's the magic of it. I love
Totally.
to have a few drinks before I go out on a Saturday night, and then go and
Yeah,
just sit down and laugh like a drain. So
yeah.
you cannot
Exactly.
beat it. Yeah, yeah.
Mm, mm.
This has been absolutely wonderful. You've been a fantastic guest. It's been
Oh, thanks
joyous
so
to
much.
talk to you. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go? What's your social media? Where can people find you?
I
You
am
want to?
at Bella Hull
Yeah,
on everything: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok,
yeah,
everything.
everything. Brilliant. Have you got any podcasts, anything like that?
I do have a podcast coming out in the next few months
Right.
with Jacob Hawley,
Oh,
who,
superb! He's been on here. What a
yeah,
legend that man is.
yeah, he's amazing. So
Yeah, it's very
yeah,
funny.
expect that in the next few
Ah,
months. But
look
that will
out
be
for
out
that.
by the time this comes out. That will be out hopefully. So
Brilliant. Yeah,
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 listen to
yeah.
that.
Well, as I say, I'm definitely coming to see you. Definitely in Edinburgh, if not before. I'm going to do my very best to try and see you in London as well, because I think you're
Amazing.
a major talent. I was well
Oh, thank you
impressed
so much.
with just the one show that I saw. Thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been wonderful, and all
Thanks
the
so much
very
for
best
having
to you.
me. Perfect. Thanks very much.
No problem at all. Thank you.